Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. Hello, and welcome to a very special episode with the Conscious Communion and Ryan Williams. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with him today. He is a student of life, a meditation facilitator, and a breathwork space holder. I met him through Aaron Robinson, who was a previous guest of the show, and I'm so thrilled to be in conversation and community with you.
Thank you so much.
And this is Luna.
This is Luna. Buna.
Yeah.
And she decided last minute she was going to join the conversation.
So grateful she's here. Yay. So I'd love to start off with getting some insight into where the work began, how you were inspired to the work that you're doing and into the creative flow that you are navigating in the here and now.
Yeah. As far as I know, the work began with my grandparents. On both sides of my mom's side and my dad's side, there's just a rich kind of tradition of spiritual work. So I kind of came into it. I'm definitely a reincarnation leaning person. I have no clue what happens when we die, but that makes the most sense, at least to my heart. And so I do believe that part of me finding the work in this life too was doing a lot of work in past reincarnations. And so I think that's probably where it's lifetimes in the making. In this lifetime, I think my first initiation into doing the work came, like real work, came after a really intensive depressive episode, where I had moved from suburban Georgia into inner city Atlanta. It was really exciting time. And then all of the like really exciting, beautiful things that were in my life all left. And so there was this profound loss. There was this extreme disorientation. And that led me into an inner healing ministry. And that was when it first started. So yeah, and I also had a friend, kind of like older brother mentor, that had given me a book on codependency like years prior. And I'm like, I'm not sure why he's giving this to me, but I bought it and read it. It was called Love is a Choice. And I ended up rereading that book during that time and realized, like I didn't see it at the time, but I had this like kind of light bulb moment where I started realizing like these kind of deeper shadows that I hadn't seen in myself. And unfortunately, I saw part of it and then I saw it all at once. And so it kind of further spiraled me into depression because I pulled away from all of my relationships because I knew that I was doing them so imperfectly, but I didn't know how to do them differently. And so I just pulled way back, and that led into this like really depressive episode. But it was in that time that like really initiated doing self-work, self-study, and finding kind of a healing pathway. And then my next big initiation was when I was engaged when I was 25. And when that engagement fell apart, that was in some ways even more of a profound initiated kind of moment into really deep work. So, and then I would say my next big one was breathwork. Yeah, my first couple, I would say my first deep somatic experience with breathwork happened within months of my first two really powerful breathwork ceremonies. And those combined were just this like really powerful initiator into at even I would say, more holistic and dynamic relationship with deep work.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Breathwork is such a teacher, and
yes,
it's here for us all.
Yes. And it's so accessible.
It's so accessible. Would you care to further extend a little bit about what your first experience with breathwork was like? Because I really haven't had anyone really share what the physical experience to breathwork can be like. And I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, to kind of preface the story, I was doing it mostly for my lung health. And I was doing, and then what happened is, as I was doing this form of breath work, I started realizing that I was building up this like intense reserve for like emotional resiliency. And so I just felt so good after. And so that's what kind of kept me doing it, and then like really exploring it. But one day it was the middle of the day. I had developed a regular routine of doing this every day. And it was basically, it's the Wim Hof kind of style, which if you're not familiar with, it's you do like about 30 to 40 deep inhales. And then you kind of do like a breath dump afterwards. And then after that, you breathe all the air out and hold on the out breath as long as you can. And you kind of like, a lot of the people that do this, they try to go as long and get into these really calm places with the body. And then when you take your breath in, you breathe in and you hold for 30 seconds. And that's when you have the powerful experiences. And then that's one round. And so I was strong cup of coffee, which caffeine, I'm sure you know, is like amplifies breath work. And I was about 7 rounds into that.
Wow.
So it was probably I'd probably been doing breath work for about 30 minutes or so, if I had to guess. And on that inhale, hold for 30 seconds, I went into like a very, very powerful mystical experience. It was middle of the day. And I went into kind of a almost like a trancey state, but I was so in my body. And my grandfather, who had passed a couple years back, who I still had an active spiritual relationship with, he showed up just as real as you're sitting with me, and started washing my feet. And I was just instantly crying. I'm like sitting lotus on the couch, middle of the day in my wife's family's place, and just like tears coming down. And but it was really powerful, because along with I didn't have this language at the time, but now I realize it was a really powerful somatic release, where there was just this like flush and just clearing of so much that I've been holding in. There was also this gift that was given to me from him. And so I was very confused, because that's not why I was doing it. And I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know that an experience like this could happen with doing breath work. And I knew that it was happening because of breath work. I had experiences like it in other areas and doing other things, but not doing breath work. And because I was doing breath work, it was the quality of it was very different, because there was such a powerful felt sense to it. And I was so deeply in my body when it was happening. So, that was my first kind of breathwork experience. And then I became so fascinated with it that I just started studying and became really curious and exploring.
Became a student of the breath.
I was already a student of breath, because I've been doing Buddhist meditation for so long. So the breath and I probably have a closer relationship with the breath than any human through Buddhist meditation, but this was different for sure.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how I love how in the beginning of our conversation, how you preface that reincarnation specifically, that this is most likely, this is not the first go around for you.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't.
And those beautiful experiences with the breath, I really believe that they can show us a clear picture of that in our felt experience of life is not linear.
Right.
And it's really this clear indication that we get to be in the flow of all that's here for us.
We do.
And it's so sweet. So how do you find your own rhythms? How do you honor your own rhythms?
That's changing. Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that question. How do I find my own rhythms? I just try things and figure out what fits.
That's so good.
Yeah.
No, staying curious is part of.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you why. Because I've gone through the process of the highly masculine of way of finding rhythms, of like planning, structuring, finding the, you know what I mean, the perfect solution, the 8 steps to this, and it works for a period of time, and then it just stops working. And especially with my wife, who just is such a powerful human, but also this like beautifully feminine person in all the senses of, you know, femininity. It's like, in order for me to stay synced up with her, I have to move into spontaneity, and I have to be willing to like ebb and flow and flux. And so, well, and then just like practically, like I just got a really bad infection. And so like the normal things that I would do to stay in rhythm didn't work when I had this infection. And that became this teacher for me of moving into developing rhythms within just like a very intense kind of rest and digest place. And I hadn't moved so profoundly into that because I had been so focused on creating and doing and exploring and being curious. And so all of that got just put on pause. And then I developed all these rhythms around all of that. So yeah, I would say one of my favorite kind of one-liner like koans or like meditation things is it's like this. Which is like a beautiful kind of one-liner thing to bring us into the present moment and like develop a felt sense. And so that's been kind of a mantra, koan, whatever, to help me kind of find a rhythm, because once I can touch into like this is what it's like, and I kind of get my story out of the way, and then I can start to develop rhythms kind of in the moment that fit with whatever's kind of coming up. So yeah, I'm also like super nerdy about different things. So I like trying different things. I also like making temporary commitments towards things. Like in August, I've been living on the 5 precepts, which is very basically not killing any living thing, not lying, not stealing, not taking any intoxicants that dull the mind and lead to carelessness, and no sexual misconduct. And so those are the first 5. I've been living on them pretty intentionally for a while, but I'm going to take on 3 more, which are more focused on spiritual practice. And I'm going to take those on in August for a whole month, just for the month of August. And so, yeah, that's one of the ways I like, well, when I tap into like, it's like this, and I feel and I look at what's going on, I then kind of see where I'm wanting to go and then develop some rhythms to get me to the next place. So yeah, I don't know. That's beautiful. Okay, cool.
No, I really appreciate your articulation of blending the masculine with the feminine and coming into that deeper understanding with the body.
Yeah.
The body is such a teacher.
Yes.
And the infection alone, that is a teacher, right? An infection of the body is a teacher to learn how to sit with, be with, and appreciate what it has to teach us in the here and now.
Oh, it was an incredible teacher. Yeah. I think that, so this part of myself that deeply resonates with the teachings of the Buddha has been really helpful, because some of those teachings, what do you want? Some of those teachings have helped me go beyond what's happening in the body as like right or wrong. And so like the Buddha says that the heavenly messengers, really these like spiritual things that are the most powerful to teach us, are aging, sickness, and death. And so, I had an ailment, I had a sickness, and so I had that teaching to move to, of like, what is this? What is the message here? How is this teaching me? And, not that I want to keep the infection, like I want to clear it out of my body. Like, there's reasons why I want to have a healthy body and feel well, but being able to not just view it as this negative thing, but kind of open to it and see what's there. So yeah, I'm so thankful for it, and also for my practice that allowed me to engage with it in that way.
1,000%. I was going to mention that, because the approaches that you've already danced with have given you the opportunity and the flexibility to be able to sit with that infection in a way that you're actually open to the messages that you can receive. Right.
Absolutely. And the vulnerability, like, because
huge piece.
That was one of the big things that just exposed all these vulnerabilities in my body, in my lifestyle. And, the teacher element was definitely in that. It just sat me down and taught me how to be. And that was probably the most, the thing I needed the most from it. But the other part was this, like, this ability to expose both what was happening in my body, and then in my, who knows how I got the infection, but all these different things. And then like I kind of ride the line and move more towards naturopathic medicine. And so I went that route first, and then I did that for a little while, and then had to kind of let go of my fixed views around around naturopathic medicine, and move more of the allopathic route. And then just did like a 7-day antibiotic and just like knocked the rest of it out. And so that was also a beautiful kind of teaching around loosening around fixed views and being able to kind of like, so there was so much of a dynamic thing, but being able to relate to it in that way, instead of just getting frustrated and irritated and bummed out the whole time. And was beautiful.
Yeah. Finding the non-duality in the duality. And it's such an interesting, hearing you say this it's always so fascinating to me how these conversations are so timely. I myself have gone through very much of the same experience from my own teachers, but living in a very masculine way for a very large portion of my life. I am now moving into this dance with the feminine and blending the two.
Wow.
And what does it look like to just simply be?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I think like what you just said is, we don't have to add anything else to spiritual practice. I think that's the core of our spiritual work, is just learning how to explore that.
Yes.
Just the being. Not that we like just do away with the doing, because it's part of what it is to be human, but like allowing the being to be like the ground that we do the doing from. So one of the languages that I love around this, because it has a felt sense to it, is working from rest. Is like, it's like moving into this place where we're at rest in our body. With the work that I do, it's like you've been able to resource your nervous system so much to where you're able to be in this deeply rested place, and then you can move and work from that. So that's been really helpful for me to kind of have some language around, and somatic language, because we know what rest feels like, and we know what it feels like when we're really rested. And then we're able to move from that and create, and do and build, and versus doing and building and creating and, adulting from a place of, or just being so exhausted all the time and running on fumes. So.
So good. I've never heard that, but that makes so much sense. Just that has been, I think so many people are coming to that realization.
Yeah.
That they can't operate in the ways that they've been operating.
Yeah.
And to tap into the nervous system and these primal essences of what the body can teach us is such a gift. And I really, the idea of creating from a rested, aligned place is just, it's real juicy.
It's the butter. It's so the good.
Yeah, it's the good.
It's the good stuff.
Yeah. And you are married to your beautiful wife, who you have a sacred union with. And
for sure,
we were talking earlier about how partnership specifically is a portal in itself.
Yeah.
And can you just share with me a little bit about that dance and what that spiritual practice of being in a partnership in a sacred union has been for you? What has that experience looked like for you?
It's looked like having a lot of fun. It's looked like and felt like having a refuge, like having a person to rest with in the midst of a ton of chaos. It's looked like normalizing conflict, normalizing messiness, normalizing unhealthiness in a healthy way, which we talked a little bit about, which is kind of the other side of the perfectionism coin. So kind of like creating an environment within a relationship where perfectionism doesn't exist. So it's looked a lot like moving towards that, not doing it perfectly at all, but pun intended, but moving in that direction. It's looked like creating together at a base level. So like our home, this is like an extension of our relationship, the space we're in. And so it's looked like that. I mean, when we go on trips, planning trips, the way that we love our families, we do that together. And we both bring our strengths to that. Like, I'm not a big gift person. I never have been. And I think, we can, if you want to, we can unpack some of that, because some of it is definitely the shadow work stuff. But she is, but she doesn't give. She does it like the Buddha says, the highest level of generosity is when you give as a crown jewel from your heart. So it's this like extension of this like overflow of love from your heart. And that's Larissa. And she just loves it. She doesn't do it because she gets anything. Even I think there's a part of her that knows when you give, there's just this beautiful buoyancy that comes to your whole spirit, that she does it because she genuinely loves the people and she loves doing it. Yeah. So, but that's just not me. Like, I don't, that's not my strength. My strength is presence. And so, figuring out and looking, how can I show up and be dynamically present with our family? And then sometimes the planning thing is a strength for me. We kind of ebb and flow with the planning structure element. Cause we both exist heavily in both our masculine and feminine, and have, and so another simple answer to what's it look like and feel like is that dance in and out of masculinity and femininity. In many ways, people would look at us and see us, because we're a man and a male presenting and female presenting human, in this type of relationship as a traditional, but the way that we dance within our relationship is very non-traditional in a sense that we don't expect one person to always be in their masculine and one person to always be in their feminine. And the way it functions is kind of a flow in and out of that. And that works for us. I don't think it's prescriptive at all, but what I did learn is that I needed someone that could do that and go there with me. That I couldn't do it with another. I couldn't create a union like this with another person that was locked into more of a static way of expressing their masculinity and femininity. And so that's another way that it's felt and looked. And what else? It's looked like loving things together. Like Luna, our dog, is like the main thing right now. And before it was like our family and our friends and our job. We were both flight attendants. And so the first year of our relationship, we worked most of our trips together. And so we were in service together because that's what we do.
Beautiful.
And so, so that's, it's looked and felt a lot like that. For us, it feels like passion. There's a lot of admiration and passion that we have for each other. That is, how do I want to say this? It's a really crucial part of our relationship. And it's been in the garden of our relationship, it's been this kind of medicine and kind of catalyst and thing that's allowed things to grow and die when they needed to die. And such a source of vitality. That's the best word to use, a source of vitality and in our relationship. So it's felt a lot like that as well. And then there have been really, I'll just use the word transcendent moments in our relationship where we've had moments where it felt like we went through, I'll speak for myself, felt like within the course of 2 days, we went through 7 lifetimes of being in a relationship. And I'm not just saying that as like because it sounds cool or, it was very literally, I felt like I had done that thing, going through a life, going through death, this whole rebirth cycle, like many, many times with her. And there was a sense when we first met that we had already done that many, many lifetimes before, or at least knew each other really well. And so there's that element to it that feels very settled in that sense where it's like, we've been doing this for a long time. So yeah, there've been kind of experiences that can't fully be explained with language or kind of the conceptual mind. We'd have to move into more like esoteric ideas and stuff to explain a lot of like the way it feels to be in that relationship with her. So.
That's so lovely. It's incredible when you can hear and see the love and respect and the honor that you feel for your partner, and to just, it's palpable. I can feel it. Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier because sacred union, marriage, and being in such a deep partnership is such a spiritual practice. Because you have another mirror.
You do. Yeah.
There, giving you that friction, giving you that space, and it's the ebb and flow of it all. And it's such a gift, but it's work.
Yep.
It's work. And it takes so much intention and conscientiousness.
Yep.
But then there's also, as you mentioned, it's also giving grace and space to the unhealthy parts of ourselves and like allowing that to also just be.
Right. Yep.
So how do you give grace for yourself and your partner in the midst of challenging seasons? Because I think that is such a helpful tool for us all. I know that everyone learns through their own experience, but I also think that as mirrors for whoever, it's such a good thing to talk about in conversation.
My like reactive way to respond to that is that a lot of times I don't, but I don't know that that's entirely true. I think there are times when I do offer a lot of spaciousness within the messiness, for things to not be perfect and for things to not be okay. But it's a huge place where I'm in process, because so much of my, especially like post some of the really painful things that happen in my life, my personality showed up in this like highly perfectionistic way where I'm like, we're going to do this work and we're going to grow up and we're going to get our shit together so that we don't feel that vulnerability of the abandonment and the like, abuse. And a lot of that then became internalized, where I then pointed it back on me for years and used that as a catalyst to grow up. And it was a really powerful catalyst, but then it just didn't, it left me in this really, dissatisfied internal place. And then I started seeing it so clearly, especially when I started meditating. Like, whoa, like you start to hear the way that you talk to yourself and the way that, not even talk to yourself, the way that you feel about yourself when you make those decisions. And then it gets really clear. And so, and then, I thought, well, if I do that work internally, then I won't do it externally. And there was a whole nother layer of programming and a partnership that was separate from, working through, giving myself grace and learning how to talk really beautiful to myself. There's certain parts that flow naturally into my relationship with Larissa, but then there was this whole other layer of learning how to do that. And I'm in the middle of it. Learning how to do that well with her, and then that actually translates into how I do it with everyone else, in a more substantial, deeper way. So when I make any kind of stride in how I treat Larissa, then it flows into everything else. Yeah, it really does. So, but yeah, I will say I'm definitely deeply in process, in that place. But if I'm honest, like I've come a long way. I've come a really long way. And you were talking about like having that person in that mirror. Larissa's a really fiery, passionate, strong-willed individual, and so that energy has helped me really kind of move more quicker and not waste time in moving into like, how do I create more space and more grace? And a lot of the language we use in the somatic landscape is not add pressure to the environment, but depressurize the system so whatever's on the inside can come out. And so, yeah, I will say, we met through Aaron. Aaron and I have both gone through the same practitioner training, and the in-person, which they're not doing right now, but when they do, it's a 4-day intensive, 12 hours a day.
Wow.
And I got through the first day and I passed the mic around, and, everyone kind of shared, and I was like, this is going to change my marriage. And it was,
I just got chills.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, I went because I was excited to like experience this breath work, get trained in it. But then I got into it and I'm like, it was such a powerful paradigm shift in human relating that I needed to really move forward in what we're talking about in that area of grace in my relationship. And so, and that's really all it was, is it was this reframing. How do I show up with Larissa in a way that puts pressure on her in a way that's just not helpful? And how do I start to exist in a way that depressurizes the environment and allows her to express and allows her to get what's in her out and move it out? And so that, and trust me, I'm like, and still feel like a baby in that, because my whole system is trained to do the opposite. And so, it's a deep deprogramming, and it's not even a very intellectual one. That's one of the harder parts, is it has to get into how I'm even posturing my nervous system and my kind of inner world, or like how I walk through that door. If I know she just got off a trip and she's worked 7 flights with, 400 or 500 passengers flying and staying in different hotel rooms, exposed to all kinds of stuff, and she just needs to rest. And I walk in and I'm just like, I'm in a really good place, but I have all this energy. That's not helpful for her system. That puts pressure on her system. And so just learning and reprogramming, like, it's not even about what I'm doing. That's the being part. It's like, how am I showing up? And so that's been, that was the paradigm shift there with Stephen Jaggers and his teachings. And then Fish is the other guy that's a big part of it. There's a whole team around him, but I had specific teachings from both of them that just like, it just clicked. There was a light bulb that came on, more than just conceptually or intellectually, but just like I could feel it. It was like the transmission that I talked to you about in the breath work, where my grandfather gave me this gift. It was like that. It was, we would call it in the, charismatic Christian world, like impartation. Yeah. Where there was a gift given. I like to use the metaphor of like a tuning fork. Because I think when we start to really deeply understand our bodies and that we're electrical beings, what's really happening is you're just getting an attunement. Yes. And your whole system's coming in alignment with the truth. And that hits your system and resonates like a tuning fork in this way that's beyond an intellectual framework. And then you get it. But then you have a choice. This is the cool part. And this is the thing I appreciated about the language of impartation, is that the way the impartation was taught is like, someone can impart something to you, but if you don't start to work with it, it's like someone giving you a gift and you not unpacking it and using it. And so it works the same way with the attunement thing, is it's like you can get attuned to something, but if you don't take that and start working with it and using it, it's just not gonna, it probably won't even stay around. But if you do, it actually expands and grows. And then the other part that was really beautiful about the impartation language is there was this teaching that like you can give it away. Like once it's given to you, or once you've been tuned to that thing, you can then tune other people or give it away. And then it grows within you when you give it away, because you're moving outside of scarcity into abundance. And that, when you move in that direction, everything just kind of grows and expands. So that's the other part that I love about that. And one of the main reasons I think that the Somatic team has been so successful is from day one, that's been their MO, is like, we're a for-profit company, we're making money, but we want to let this thing grow and open and expand as much as it wants to. And that's a completely different, there's amazing, and I'm not trying to just gas up the Somatic team, but there's incredible breath workers out there that have created really powerful practitioner trainings that they just move in a different way. Yeah. And they have amazing training, but that when I came in contact with these teachers and I had this full body like experience of this is the next thing for me, what I didn't realize was that was a huge part of it. Is it wasn't just the modality, it was how they were moving into an abundance framework instead of a scarcity framework. And their heart was to get this out for people. And that was kind of the kind of base that they were moving from in this. So, and then it was cool. It was really cool to have Aaron go do the training and him come back and have the same, like, whoa, just like, whoa, this is hard to even articulate how rare and such a gift it is to be a part of this community and part of this work. So I got off on a whole diatribe there on impartation, but
I love it. Yeah. No, and then I have like this vision coming to me that's just like fertile ground. And so what I see, like, especially with the somatic team and these practitioners that are doing this work, is that it is such fertile ground for, yes, doing the work for ourselves, because that's where it starts. But then once we open that space up for ourselves, then we can impart it to others. And that is ultimately, service is how we can redirect and like shatter the paradigms of the past to do something completely different.
Yeah.
And like, let's go.
It's amazing. I mean, that's what I love. One of the things I love the most about this work is the impartation is in the experience.
Yes. 1,000%.
That's all it is.
1,000%.
Like, it's not about me passing anything. Like, all we are doing is just opening the door. And if people are willing to walk into that experience, they get it.
Yes.
And this is one of the things that I love the most is I don't say this as much, but in the beginning I was like, I don't really have an agenda with this, but I have a little bit of a hidden agenda. And that is like, I want to give people back sovereignty over their nervous system.
I love that.
And it's the most rewarding part of it. The experiences people can have. Or do you want up, or are you just saying hey?
Hey.
Okay. But the part that feels the most exciting. You want to see if she wants?
Okay. Hey, baby.
Yeah. The thing that feels the most exciting is like everything that you did, you just did. Like we kind of helped guide you through this experience, but you did it and you can do this on your own. There's certain things I would recommend not doing right now on your own, but like you can shorten this practice and use your breath to come back into control over your nervous system. And one of the things I say a lot at the end is like the way that you feel right now, you can feel all the time. And you brought yourself into that experience. So that's what's exciting for me about this is like, you don't have to put anything in your mouth. You don't really have to go anywhere. Wherever you are, you have your breath and you can use these kind of breathing practices to bring yourself there. That's the most rewarding part of it. And that's the thing that I think, I'll always love the most is, seeing those kind of light bulbs come on and, people have that experience. I remember, I'll say this and then we can transition. I have a really close friend who recently started getting into being a therapy. And he's gone the kind of clinical counselor route. And so we've been talking a lot about the overlaps of talk therapy in your kind of like normally trained kind of CBT, now DBT, and now we've got, it's called ACT, I forget what it is, but and then the overlap with that and somatic care and understanding what's happening in the body and looking at it like that. So we were having this very New York conversation where we had like a very small block to work with and we're talking, and then I'm walking into the subway and I'm looking and I'm like, all right, we got 5 minutes. And I'm like, we've been talking about somatic work, which is hard to talk about because it's an experience. And we've been talking about breath work. And I'm like, this isn't me. Like, I like to do it and then talk about it. And so I'm like, do you want to do some breath work real quick? And he was like, sure. And I'm like, all right, we got 5 minutes. By the time we get started, we'll have like 4 minutes because I want to make sure you can catch your train. And so we sat there on the stairs while people are going in and did breath work. And within probably 2.5 minutes, he was able to get a pretty intense nervous system reset. And he was like, what in the world? He's like, I got to go, but we've got to talk about this. So that was such a cool, then that was in the beginning when I first started working with this, to be able to, in 2 minutes, help someone bring themselves into such a powerful reset. Nervous system reset was really beautiful. And in New York City.
1,000%.
You're just like
the energy
plugged into this like cocaine-esque energy all the time.
And to be able to liberate that's with a matter of an instant. The breath is there's nothing like it. And I'm not sure if you know this. I just shared this in another episode, but the breath in Hebrew means pneuma.
Yeah.
And it's spirit. Oh, I love that you know that. Of course you know that.
Yeah.
It's so, of course it means spirit.
Oh, absolutely.
Return to spirit. This divine essence of all that we are, and resetting the nervous system. I really appreciate what you said about giving people back their sovereignty and at least ushering it, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I don't want to go off on a long diatribe, but like our nervous systems have been co-opted through technology by people that have a lot of money, that have learned how to use the technology in very manipulative ways. And a lot of us don't even know it's happening. Like, we're not conscious of it. And you become conscious of it, but then if you don't have a way to actually come back in control of your nervous system, then it's just like doom and gloom. And it's like, oh shoot, like, I'm not going to just get rid of my phone. I'm not going to stop watching, what I'm watching. And then if I do that, okay, well then what do I do? And there's so many things. We can go for a walk in nature. We can, now cold plunges are a thing, and, cold shock therapy and hot shock therapy, but the breath we always have. And the breath has been the most powerful way to go there for me, in many different ways. So yeah, so thankful for it. I wanted to say thank you for asking me these questions and letting me just like go off on these kind of long-ended diatribes.
I appreciate them. I appreciate that you're open and willing to go there. I think that that's the heart and soul behind what this podcast means. For the vision that Spirit gave me, was that it's really about allowing people the space to share their experience, because I believe that we are mirrors for each other in the most beautiful sense of the word.
Yep.
And what an opportunity for us to learn from another by just listening. Deep listening is a spiritual practice in itself. And let's just listen to one another.
Yeah.
And just see how it feels in our body, somatically.
Yeah.
Get out of the mind a little bit. But if it makes sense for you to go there, then do that too.
Yeah. What are some of the practices that have been helpful for you, other than breathwork, obviously, for deep listening?
So it's funny, I had another guest on who is a psychotherapist, but he's also really leaning into spiritual work. And he has this whole process, and it's called FABU. And it's finding the place somatically, attending to that place,
right?
Attuning,
right?
Breath, and then understanding.
So breathing into it, noticing, breathing into it, and then staying until it kind of opens and shows you whatever it wants to show you.
So it's really different than listening how we think that we should. It's different than how we think we should be listening analytically, but really receiving what another individual is saying through the somatic essence of what's here for us in the here and now.
Yep.
And it's such a different approach, but it's been revolutionary for me. I don't always practice it, but when I do, I notice game changer.
Right.
Absolute game changer. But meditating, of course, breath work, of course. And like, those are the things that get me grounded in my nervous system to not be so reactive.
Totally.
So that I can then receive.
Yeah. When you're creating the body awareness of whatever that space is there a kind of common felt sense of what that is? Is it like usually tension? Is it usually heat? Is there a kind of common thing, or is it a lot of different things?
It's a lot of different things. It kind of depends on who the individual is that I'm interacting with. You know, I feel a lot of spaciousness as I speak with you, and I feel like expansion from the heart center, which is good.
Yeah.
And then there's individuals that when I'm in space with, maybe it's a family member, right?
Right.
I think we all can think of a family member where we feel a little bit more tense when we're in space with them.
Right.
And so those are the things that are really interesting to listen to. Well, why am I feeling tense? And asking ourselves those questions and then really staying curious to, well, this is a perception. And because we are mirrors for each other, these feelings aren't about the other person. They're about me.
Totally.
So exploring that and not pawning off the responsibility on the other person who's making you feel some kind of way.
Right.
Because it's you and your body that's feeling some kind of way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really working with trying to figure out how to communicate this to people. Because most of our teaching is the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any like insights and like do you think it's just practice? Do you think we just communicate certain practices to people like you're talking about to bring into ownership and accountability instead of the kind of victim and like blaming things outside? Or do you think there's a way to like inspire people in this direction? Because it feels like to me, and some of it's isolated in certain cultures. I'm not going to call anyone out, but like there's certain groups of kind of pockets of people that like hub around each other that like are entrenched in the opposite of what you're talking about. And for me, again, it's not judging those groups because then I'm doing the same thing, but it's like, how can I inspire them out of that cage into what I know is liberation? What I know that what you're saying and that practice is true liberation, because you're not dependent on an external thing for your inner experience. Once you take ownership of that stuff, you know, and it can become really refined. If you really go deep in the true teachings of the Buddha, like this is what he brings you to, is like this deep, expansive awareness that like every suffering that comes up is a product of your inner world. And that's and Buddhism is still, I think, a really foreign thing and a hard thing for us as at least Americans to really understand and integrate. And some of those teachings are really hard to understand and integrate. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on like how to inspire a mass amount of people that even if they don't realize it yet, are so focused on thinking about life the other direction.
That's a good question. I think, and it's been an ever-present one. I really do believe, though, that we can only do what we can do for ourselves. And then that invites or permissions someone other than ourselves to at least see and witness.
Yeah.
And especially when you get to spend physical space with someone, like I feel you have a regulated nervous system and I can feel that. And I feel that safety and space with you.
Totally.
And the more we go out, even if it's to the grocery store, and we get to have some type of interaction and show an individual maybe that we wouldn't necessarily encounter kindness, grace, love, respect.
Totally.
That's a ripple effect, in my personal opinion. And knowing that we are just energy.
Yeah.
And being able to just ripple that out.
Yeah.
And practicing that, like, how do we extend our energy further in a way that's also safe for us?
Totally.
Right? Like, the boundary part is such a vital piece.
Oh, huge. I know it's still a very misunderstood piece too.
Very misunderstood. And that's a dance. I think it will forever be a dance in service. When you're in service to people.
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself and your fields while also extending yourself?
Yeah. It's also a dance because when it's understood in a healthy light, it's there for the sake of generosity. And that's the dance, is like, how do I create this environment for myself so I can be more generous? Because a lot of the dance, I think, around boundaries right now, unfortunately, is still around control and protection. And it's the opposite of what you're talking about. It's just like, this is bad. It's just, I need to, good vibes only. I need to create an environment where I can protect myself and be okay. And I think there's a time and a space for a certain quality of that. At least that's been my experience. And allowing that to be moving towards like deeply healing portals and environments, whether it's like hiking on the coast alone or going to a wilderness spa or going to a breathwork session or developing a regular relationship with a really powerful body worker, whatever it is, and just moving towards those things. But I think the trap is when it becomes so internally focused and there's not that like generative, like, I'm doing this so I can be in service. And I can give generously.
Yes.
I think that's the dance. And I'm saying that because I've done it the other direction too. And I know the way it feels. And it's just also not as fun.
No.
It's just not as fun.
It's not. And it's funny that you say that, and I'm glad that you bring it up, because cancel culture is such a huge thing it's a buzzword, right? We hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And I've very much had to dance with the boundaries and knowing that, okay, there's let's work with the boundaries so that we can find more spaciousness. So those boundaries aren't maybe so structured and strict, because that's not fun.
No,
it's not fun to be stringent and not free, like to not be free in our ability to be generous. It doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't. It's just fear. Fear doesn't feel good when you're grounded in it in an unhelpful way. And to me, that's the way I kind of just understand cancel culture. It's just a manifestation of some really beautiful values that have the shadow of fear underneath it. And I use the word shadow very intentionally because we don't see our shadow. And so it's people are, I think the cancel culture thing is very well intentioned, and there still is a lot of delusion around how unhelpful it actually is in the long term. But it's also one of those things where, like, as humans, we just grow very slowly. And so I also look at it as like, it's just the next stepping stone into our own evolution, into creating healthy communities. Because that's the heart behind cancel culture. It's like, it's wanting to address these like really gross parts of our soul. And moving into like that perfectionism that I struggle with, and it being fear-based, moving in fear, and we're like slowly developing a contemplative mind. And so I think I know, like the more that we're able to develop that more intuitive, contemplative mind, we'll come up with solutions that aren't so rigid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's already happening, but what we're seeing right now is just so intense, to a point where like there's almost a need for a lot of us to create boundaries, create boundaries around it. And boundaries, like you're saying, like, the other way I really like seeing boundaries is like this membrane that like decides what comes in and what doesn't. But the thing about that is, like, in order to develop a boundary like that, you have to develop mindfulness.
1,000%.
Like if your ability to be aware of what's coming in or not coming in is diluted, like even if I haven't been sleeping well and it's just not there, like I can't create the same environment to say, no, that's not okay. And like, that's okay. I'm going to interact with this time and see how that goes. And depending on that outcome, I'm going to readjust. And, that's a kind of, for me anyways, it's impossible to do if my mindfulness is just like diluted and I haven't been practicing.
Yes. I went on a big trip, went to Japan in May, and I practiced when I was in Japan, was mindful. And then I came home and I hadn't done this for years. Like I've had a mindfulness practice for years. And there was something in me there was some friction.
Totally.
And I think it was because I was able to explore and be curious and not have a time frame of when I needed to be up or do anything. We literally didn't plan much. So we were just exploring. And so coming home, I didn't have my mindfulness practices in place because I was like, I'm just going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And it wasn't good. Like I didn't feel good about myself, and my thoughts were running wild.
Yeah.
And I needed to tip the scale because I hadn't in so long to really reassess and readjust. This is why this is important. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah.
And it was like almost like an experiment.
Yeah.
I had to do it for myself.
You learned.
I learned.
Yeah.
And I learned real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love viewing what would normally be, this big mistake. And then we create this whole story. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And creating all this, and then you're like, oh, I learned. It was an experiment. That's not how I'm going to do that a little differently next time. And now that I've realized that I've just let my mind run wild for 2 weeks, I know that I need to take some time to give it some boundaries and allow it to kind of calm down and slow down and sit down so it can really become more aware of its environment.
Yeah.
And that in itself, like this idea of training our minds is also like such a foreign thing. So I'm so fortunate. I had a long conversation with my sister recently where I was like, man, if I had a really like healthy meditation practice, and I had a good meditation teacher when I was in high school, or maybe even a little before, and all of my 20s would have been different. Like, of course, high school would have been different, but the way that would have set my mind up and how neurodivergent I am, and even it's similar to like the breath work being this like opportunity for nervous system autonomy and regulation and sovereignty. It was like, I didn't know I could train my mind. I didn't know that I could actually do things to develop concentration. I was just given pills, which I'm not completely anti, ADD medication, but I was just given things to modulate my brain chemistry to try to help me do that. And I had no idea that there were practices I could do to actually change my neurochemistry and develop new ways of just moving through the world and relating to life and relating to my mind. That didn't come until I was 31.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a part of me that's like, oh man, what would right now be like had I started doing this when I was, even like 8, 9, 10, and then developing more advanced forms of meditation practice when I was in my, late teens. And because I know myself well enough that if I had started then, I would have had such profound experiences that were so outside of what I was experiencing that it would have kept me sustaining some level of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wouldn't have been what it is now, but I can't help but wonder.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
My background is in child development.
Oh, wow.
So I think about it often, and it's actually a huge part of my heart and my vision for just what society could be. My husband and I created a book, and he's an illustrator, and it's all about feeling your feelings. It's all about breathing.
Come on. Feeling our feelings.
Feeling our feelings. And what does that look like? And it was not, I didn't write it. I was the vehicle.
It was a download.
It was
just like channeled,
fully channeled.
Yeah.
Got out of the way. Okay, cool.
What do you think's happening there in that experience? How do you understand it? Because I know what you mean, where it's just, it comes in fully cooked.
And it's interesting because at that time, snowed in. We were snowed in.
Totally.
And so I think it was because, you can use boredom. People want to say the word boredom. Boredom can be an opportunity.
Yes.
I just had my journal and I was just writing. I was just writing and seeing what came. And then Spirit just started giving me these words and I was like, okay, and then I kind of left it alone and then I revisited it and I was, oh, this is a book. This could be a book.
Yes.
And so it's just been a prayer and it's been a dance because my husband is an artist and that's its own creative process. So we're waiting patiently for when the time feels right for it to be ushered in. It's ushered in. It's already here. It's already happening.
Right.
But so much of it is, I think, just being open to the timely process and not hyper focusing on time.
Totally. Yeah.
He hasn't maybe felt as spacious as he normally would to create and paint these beautiful works of art. He's conceptualized what he wants to put forth, but to find the energy from a heart-centered place, he hasn't had it.
Yeah.
So knowing that I have to be patient and not push any of my expectations on him, that's part of the book and part of what we're ushering in. Yeah. That's the sacred union, right? It's the dance between you and your significant other. And you do it all the time because you are a flight attendant. Mm-hmm. You're doing it always.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're rushing that process, you're putting stress on the process, which actually, if we're looking at time, slows the process down. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but it's hard. It's hard when you know you got something good. Mm-hmm. Especially when it's not even from you. Mm-hmm. To bring it back to our original tradition, it's the Mother Mary, it's the carrying the divine and holding that thing in this way that honors it. But also I gotta surrender. Surrender at the same time because it's way bigger than you. Yeah.
Surrender.
The surrender part. It's huge. It's hard.
It's very hard. Yeah. How do you learn to practice that for yourself in your life? Or how have you?
I think that the best way that I've found is silence, internal silence, like learning how to quiet the internal landscape, create awareness on where I'm holding on, and then learning how to develop wholesome qualities that help me let go. And then there's just these like, and a part of the development of wholesome qualities are these like just things that I'll go to, these like nuggets of wisdom. Like one of them is like one of the meditation teachers that's been so deeply impactful for me is he talks about when he first started meditating, he was living in Thailand and he didn't speak language. He didn't speak Thai. He didn't speak Pali, which is the language that all the Buddhist texts were written in. And so his whole practice was just letting go. He would use the breath as like an anchor, but then something would come up and he would let go. And his language that he'll use, I've heard him talk about sometimes, and he's currently the oldest monk in our tradition. He's been in robes the longest. And I think he's in his late 80s, early 90s, and is living in the UK right now. But his name's Ajahn Sumedho, but he says, in the beginning, I was just focused on being an earthworm and just letting go. And it was just like, when he's saying the earthworm, it's just like, I'm no one special. I'm not trying to be this powerful teacher. I'm not trying to, because he was a monk, he was in robes. And there's this, I think whether you're going to be a monk or nun or a spiritual teacher or whatever, or just a meditator, you can attach to these ideas of who you're going to be and what that's going to look like once you get to that place. And so the whole, like, I'm just an earthworm. I'm just just going to that like simple, I'm a nobody. I'm just practicing. I'm just letting go. I'm letting go of all of that becoming. It was the act of becoming is one of the things that the Buddha said was such a powerful cause of suffering. And it's huge. It's so normalized in our culture. Just like, who are you becoming? What are you becoming? How are you becoming? And it's just it's a dead end trail. So things like that have been really helpful. The father of our tradition, Ajahn Chah, says, he has this phrase that I think about a lot. If you let go a little, you'll have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you'll be completely at peace. You'll have complete peace. And he's also very famous for saying that the whole of the spiritual practice is knowing that you need to let go and not being able to. And so, you have both of those. You have both sides of like, okay, I know that the more I'm able to practice this, setting these things down and letting them go and loosening my grip around them, the better off I'm going to be. But the more mindfulness you have, the more you realize how attached you are to all this stuff. And then there's just layers and layers of it, and they keep going. And so to have that awareness of like the whole of the practice is just to be aware of how I'm still clinging or pushing, which is the inverse of clinging, and how I'm doing that. And I'm probably, if I keep practicing really well and deepening my practice and surrounding myself with really powerful practitioners and beautiful people and these teachings and practicing generosity and practicing virtuous living and these certain things that are supportive to that path, I'll get a little ways in, and maybe I'll, by the end of it, I'll be completely cooked, but more than likely, like, I'll just do what I can and trust the results of it to just kind of come instead of attaching to the results of my practice. That took a long time to get to as a meditator, of not fixating on what it was producing or where I was getting, but just doing it, knowing that it was moving me in a certain direction. That's been a really helpful shift. But a lot of it is just the returning, to make it really practical. When I am either sitting in meditation or having an argument with my wife, or frustrated with a passenger, or upset about a family dynamic, and then I notice, oh, I'm back in that place, and then I can return, and I know how to return. That practice of returning, whether it's returning back to the breath, moving back into the body, allowing my mind to settle, calm down, eventually, hopefully it opens up into some kind of really profound inner stillness, or it's just like, oh, I'm armed right now in conversation with my wife. I don't want to, this is not what I want to be. How did I get here? Okay, maybe I'll address how I got here later. What do I need to do? Oh, I need to come into my body, drop the story, feel what's going on, take care of myself so I can move. It's that returning, that process of returning, and dropping anything that limits that returning. So like for most of my life, there was so much frustration around having to return again, do the thing again, and then developing this whole story, this whole shame cycle of like, oh, you're look at what's going on. It's a deep pattern programming, and so thankfully that's almost fully weeded out in its more mature ways. So the returning is really quick, and I can just go right back into like, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. So I would say, that the developing a deep relationship with that process of returning and beginning again has been the most helpful thing for me practically with surrender. Of it's not like the idea of surrender is a trap, but the practice of surrender is liberation. And there's nothing really more to, I think, the spiritual life than that practice of just learning to let go again and again and again and again. So yeah, I would say that's been my experience with it anyways.
Thank you for that articulation. That was beautiful.
Yeah, for sure.
Really beautiful.
Thanks for letting me.
Yeah, of course. If you had one offering, one slice of wisdom that you would like to offer and share, what would it be?
I think the thing that feels the most important to share right now, because it's going to change constantly, is it's really valuable to normalize your messiness. And there's a fear there that if you normalize it, then you'll just stop caring. But it's not. What happens is when you start to normalize it and you start to create space for that messiness to be there, you know what you have to work with, and you have more of an awareness of it. And it's like gardening. It's like if you're just pretending like the weeds aren't even there, and these things that you don't want there are there, or you're like trying to kill it all, and you just, instead of working with it, some of the really beautiful meditation teachers, they kind of teach that it's actually it's nutriment for the soil. when you allow that stuff to come up and you work with it, you don't necessarily allow it to like move you into, unskillful, unwholesome, things. You learn to not chase it and follow it, but you allow it to come up and be there. You can work with it, and then it actually somehow becomes fodder for like, or what's the word I'm looking for? It helps things grow. Not a catalyst, but like in a garden, fertilizer. Becomes fertilizer for the soil. That feels the most pertinent to share right now. And really practically, what's top of mind within the context of that is looking at and normalizing the way that we individually victimize ourselves, and just being willing to be real about that, notice it and see it, because we all do it, and it's normative in our culture to victimize ourselves and give our power away in that way. And so just allowing ourselves to be with that, I would say if we can start to move in that direction, we can get a lot of work done really quickly.
Yeah.
Because that's the quickest way to shut down any work. Like and to think you're doing a lot of really good work and getting nowhere. I'm not saying this as a judgment, but as a just because I care. But most of the spiritual community is still stuck in this victim space. And are convinced that it's the way forward. And I don't think the way is to call out individual people or groups. I think it's taking internal ownership for ourselves of how we do that individually. I think that's the way. Because like I said earlier, if I'm doing that and I'm like, oh, such and such person is victimizing, or my wife or whatever it's, I'm doing this, I'm getting wrapped up in the same thing again. And so just to drop the story, come in and start to be internally reflective on how we blame and put the blame outside of ourselves for what's happening. That's why I was like so curious if you had any insight on like how to inspire people to do this, because it's literally moving the exact other direction that like most of our environments are training us to do. So so normalizing that messiness. If we can normalize that messiness and give ourselves grace for how we're victimizing ourselves and allow us to move forward in the process, like that feels like a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's so hard. Like I would love to say that there's all these ways to inspire people, right?
Yeah.
But really it's about staying grounded in our own practice so that we can be free.
No, your response was beautiful. It was, I'm going to use a kind of cliche thing, but it's like the best critique of the bad is the practice of the better, or the practice of the good. And that's what you were verbalizing, is it's like, I think like the best way to inspire is just to do it and be it, and just let that expand and let that be kind of a signpost to people that there's a different way. There's another way. And that's, I think what I took from what you were saying is like, this is something that's more caught than it is taught.
Yes.
Like you catch it from someone that's doing it, and you see it modeled, and it inspires you and informs you to do it. So that's what I took from your response, which is really, it was an encouraging way. And it was really helpful for me and illuminating, because I've been really sitting with this. So like, gosh, how do I enter into this space we're in together with communities of people and try to inspire action in a different direction. And So that was really helpful. Thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah. And can you tell people how they can work with you and where they can find you?
Yeah. Probably the easiest way right now is on my Real Tuned Up Instagram account. That's my public account. I'll eventually have like a website and everything. But yeah, it's just one word, Real Tuned Up. And just reach out to me on there and I can kind of go from there. You can put my email. Are you able to?
I'll put all your deets.
Yeah. So email is also really helpful. And so I can give you that as well. But yeah, probably the quickest way to verbally tell people is that account. So, and that's been its own conundrum of, it's hard because I'm telling people this, but then I get off it for periods of time. And so once we connect on there, then we can kind of transition into something I'm a little more reliable with. But yeah, thanks for asking.
So good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your authenticity and for how you show up in the world, because
of course,
I believe that you are an incredible mirror for whoever comes into sphere with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. When you see it, you can honor it and then just be appreciative for people who are doing it. You're doing the work.
That's the truth.
You're out there and you're loving people. And with you being a flight attendant, that's powerful.
Yeah, it's its own medicine.
I bet.
We're talking about like understanding and viewing things as medicine, and we could do a whole thing on that. But one thing I'll kind of drop into this conversation is it is a practice on impermanence. And the problem is a lot of people that have this job don't have a value for impermanence in a functional way. And so it creates a lot of mental health elements. But for me, it's been such an incredible form of powerful medicine because everything is changing constantly. And it shows me really quickly where I am blocking that flow and moving into control, because like the second that I do that, something will shift and change and I'll get rerouted and be in a different city. Or like what just happened is Larissa and I we had a Maui trip that we were so excited. We were going to work to Maui, lay over in Maui, work the trip back. And we hit 2 or 3 accidents driving up for work. And, thankfully our company has a commuting policy where like it allows for certain situations like that, but we didn't get to go. And it took me out, I didn't realize how much I was not just attached, but like finding my refuge and knowing that we were going to be there together. Instead of where I practice taking refuge, which is the Theravada Sangha, which for me are mystical things. They're not just ideas or concepts, but and they're transcendent truths, not just based on Buddhism. But I was going to this for my refuge, and it took me out for days. So just to have that as such a powerful teacher, and illuminating these places where there's more work to do. I'm like so thankful. But there's so many different ways I can talk about my job and what I love about it and how it fits into my life. But yeah.
Another conversation, which I'm super open and willing to have.
We could do a whole conversation just on being a conscious flight attendant.
Let's go. I'm down.
Yeah.
Just being conscious. Well, and it goes so far beyond because it is so different than what the majority of people do in their work life.
Yeah.
And it's fluid. Like you have to be fluid. You can't be stagnant. So it's like that is
much more fun when you're fluid.
Yeah. That in itself is a conscious practice.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah, it puts a demand on a necessity for conscious practice, because otherwise you're miserable you're like, oh, we just got delayed. Oh, like we were supposed to be here. Oh, I ended up flying to Fort Lauderdale. This flood hit the Fort Lauderdale airport. I think I was in the airport for over 12 hours. We didn't leave until 4:30 in the morning. Thankfully, I was able to like navigate getting an Uber driver, and they had a tall enough car where they were able to weave in and out of all these cars that had just been flooded and stranded in the road to get us to the hotel. It was just like it was a whole thing. And that's an extreme example, but it's like, without the practices I have, not just my mindfulness practice, but like ways to recover from that. Cause that was a challenging thing for my body. It was a challenging thing for my mind to be able to come home and be like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this to like get back into the green after this experience. I'm so thankful, but I can't imagine how people do this job without it. Yeah. I don't. It's one of the things that I'm like constantly thinking about, like, how can I be of service to my work group to help resource them, you know? And there's ways that I definitely am doing that, but I just have such a soft spot for flight attendants. Yeah. That it's like, just jet lag, the jet lag thing. It's like, there's ways to clear jet lag and like not even really experience jet lag much. Yeah. If you have the practices. So anyways, I can keep talking. I know we should probably close. How long we've been going? Oh, that's not bad. I was like, oh man, this is like 2 hours. We've been doing this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been a real pleasure and honor. So thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sending you off with the utmost peace and blessings wherever you're at in your day, and all love. Bye.
Hey there, it's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too, so if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.